Morning, everybody. We're about 25 minutes behind schedule, and I'm sure you're all glad to see me, as I'm the last subcommittee here today. So I'm gonna get right to it, and I'm gonna cut out some of the usual commentary I have. So I'd like to call the Public Safety Appropriations Subcommittee to order, and we begin on Section 18, Department of Community Supervision. On line 18.2.6, increase funds for rent at the West Georgia Circuit, the Geechee Circuit, Mountain Circuit. The House recommends an adjustment to the Governor's recommendation for a new total of $726,000, $194, to account for increased rent projections from the State Properties Commission. This funding keeps the field office in West Georgia the department was contemplating closing because of a spike in rental costs. Section 19, Department of Corrections. On line 19.1.5 in the Department Administration Program, the budget adds a new line item for one mechanic position at $69,837. There's a backlog on service requests within the Fleet Services Department. The department would like to hire a mechanic from the Transition Center after release that the department has trained and certified. On line 19.3.7 in the Food and Farm Program, the subcommittee adds $4,890,000 for food services contracts due to rising food costs. In line 19.3.8, increases funds of $850,000 for combine at the farm in Reedsville. Most people don't know that there's an extensive farm in Reedsville, and they grow about 95% of all the food for 50,000 inmates. On line 19.4.6 in the health program, the House provides $48.6 million for a per diem increase and to provide for an increase in the number of inmates served by the physical health contract. Line 19.4.7 and 19.4.8 provides an increase for staff retention in a mental and dental health contract. In the Offender Management Program, line 19.5.6, and you'll see this later in the State Prison Program on line 19.7.20, provides a total increase of $1.25 million for the Residential Substance Abuse Treatment Program contract. 19.5.7 is reimbursement for local county jails where over 20% of their capacity is occupied by detainees with contraband or drone drop related charges because of a nearby state prison. Total amount funded is $1.5 million. In the private prison program, there's a small true-up adjustment on line 19.6.1. On 19.7.8 in the state prisons program, the subcommittee recommends an increase to the governor's recommendation to hire new correctional officers in the amount of $34,914,395 to continue to bring down the correctional officer to offender ratio. Now 19.7.9 provides funding of $695,000 for 6 canine handlers. Right now, there are only 26 handlers and 57 canines. There's a slight increase from the governor's recommendation to account for the ongoing cost for drones funded and amended. Last year, they had 4,000 canine callouts in the prison. Line 19.7.10 funds $1,443,000 for the personnel in the Overwatch and Logistics, known as the OWL unit. This is a small increase to account for these positions being hired in at a salary above a correctional officer 1 position. Line 19.7.14 increases funding for Lee Arundel State Prison to $3.8 million to allow 200 state prisoners to remain at the prison instead of all state prisoners moving to McCrae's Women's Facility. The current plan is to move all state prisoners other than the fire service state inmates and the transition center inmates. The House would like to keep 200 state prisoners for a number of reasons. There's a Georgia Correctional Institute's packaging plant that has 45 to 60 state inmates working at any given time to package food and personal item goods for state prisons. These inmates earn money for working at the plant. The remaining state prisoners need to work in the laundry, the kitchen, and maintain the facility and grounds. The additional state prisoner would be housed in B unit, which is renovated just a few short years ago in 2022 with state funds. Further, in an environment where we are struggling for bed space, this adds another 200 beds to the prison bed shortage. The female offender population is predicted to rise along with the male population over the next few years. 19.7.18 analyzes the rental increase provided in the amended budget for a total of $219,000. 19.7.20 we spoke about earlier to add the funds for residential substance abuse treatment program contracts. 19.7.21 increases the offender call monitoring contract of $1.1 million due to an increase in usage of all phones because our prisons are doing such a good job of shutting down cell phones in prisons where our managed access systems are operational. 19.7.22 increases funds for a data intelligence annual maintenance at $1,750,000. Section 20, Department of Defense, is no changes. Section 27, the Georgia Emergency Management and Homeland Security Agency. Line 27.8.4, the House says no to an increase in funds for the federal match for the EMPG grant because FEMA announced they are no longer requiring a one-year performance period. GEMA has more time to perform. Line 27.8.5, the subcommittee decided against moving the gang case management system support from the GBI to GEMA. Line 27.87 increases $928,000 in state funds for operations. The subcommittee recommended this change because GEMA Homeland Security relies on federal funding to operate, and frequent federal government shutdowns and slow reimbursements have made operating tenuous for the agency month to month. Line 27.8.8 provides $2 million for emergency services. Section 30, Georgia Bureau of Investigation. In the Forensic Science Services Program on line 30.3.7, the House is continuing our long-standing support of retaining and recruiting medical examiners in our state by adding $1 million to bring the salaries up to compete at a national market. This appropriation will bring up the starting salary from $270,000 to $300,000 and adds 2 steps to the salary structure. Right now, a medical examiner with 20 years of experience is making the same as a medical examiner with 5 years of experience. Fully staffing our medical examiner's office is a priority of this House and has been for the last decade. While we've made lots of progress over the last several years with our fellowship program, loan repayment program, and location stipends, the medical examiner's office continues to have doctor vacancies. In 30.3.8 and 30.3.9 provide salary increases for the crime lab to continue to retain and recruit at $1.6 million as our salaries have begun to fall behind other local and federal crime labs. In the Regional Investigative Services Program on line 30.4.8, the subcommittee has a slight adjustment to account for some one-time expenses not funded in the amended budget for a total of $838,000. Line 30.4.11 leaves the gang case management support in GBI, increases the funding by $2.1 million for a total of $3.1 million to ensure local enforcement agencies can continue to access critical gang member information. Look down in the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council of Accountability Court Judges Program. On line 30.6.4, a new line item has $3.1 million to support an increase in accountability court participation. For every $1 we spend here, the state saves $9.32 by not incarcerating this person and providing them services. In line 30.6.5, it provides $93,000 for a new Veterans Treatment Court in Rockdale County. In the Family Violence Program, our subcommittee took several hours and heard from our service providers, domestic violence shelters, sexual assault centers, child advocacy centers, and CASAs. The population they serve are citizens who have been victims of crime. The state requires a number of mandates in order for these centers and shelters to receive state funding, but the amount of money the state provides is not commensurate with our requirements. For this reason, our subcommittee is making strong show of support and gratitude by providing these $20.7 million. A lot of you know, but the federal government had grants for all these programs, and they have gone away and diminished in the last 6 or 8 years. So we're trying to catch up. Line 30.7.2 provides $9.4 million for domestic violence shelters. Last year, more than 40,000 victims were served, and 15,000 more were turned away because bed space was at capacity. These are women and children who typically have an irate male on the outside that's pursuing them, and I can't believe that we're having to turn them out in the street. Line 30.7.3 provides $3.3 million for sexual assault centers. In 2025, these centers serve more than 9,000 victims across the state. In line 30.7.4, transfers the base funding of $1.8 million from the Department of Human Services to the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council for child advocacy centers. Line 30.7.5 adds $5.2 million for child advocacy centers. These centers provide critical victim services for children that have been sexually or physically abused or witnessed a homicide or domestic violence event by providing a forensic interview where a trained provider interviews one child one time so they aren't re-traumatized over and over again. Sadly, more than 21,000 children were served last year. Line 30.7.6 provides $912,000 for 8 full-time and 20 satellite child advocacy centers not currently receiving state funding. Section 31, Department of Juvenile Justice, line 31.4.7, in the Secure Detention Program, annualized an increase of $2.5 million for personal services to reflect decreased turnover for our juvenile correction officers. Section 33, Department of Law, lines 33.1.3 and 33.2.2, have some true-ups for the state health benefit program rate change. Section 35, State Board of Pardons and Paroles, no changes. Section 39, Department of Public Safety. In the Field Services Program on line 39.5.7, the subcommittee provides $300,000 for exterior hardening of patrol cars, which are bulletproof windows. In the Georgia Firefighter Standards and Training Council on line 39.8.4, we are funding $167,000 for one more safety and compliance specialist in metro areas. This will completely cover the state. This is the metro area is the last place, so every fire department in the state can be inspected every year. The Georgia Peace Officer Standards and Training Council program on line 39.9.9 adds $634,000 for statutory training provided for the chiefs of police and Georgia sheriffs. State law requires them to do this training, and we feel that we ought to be funding it. In the Georgia Public Safety and Training Center, line 39.10.3 adds $92,000 for the Georgia Public Safety Training Center, which was erroneously excluded from the law enforcement retirement adjusted. Throughout the fiscal year 2027 budget, of retirement benefit was increased specifically for our law enforcement officers across state agencies. This change allows employer match for law enforcement on the state's 401k to increase from 9% to 15% of their salary after 10 years of service. Line 39.10.9 adds $97,500 for ongoing costs of a statewide radio system purchased in the amended year budget. In line 39.10.10 provides $171,000 for one new officer training position per House Bill 238 from the 2025 session to train officers on how to investigate elder abuse. And that concludes the presentation. So I have a motion.
Move.
Is there a second? Any discussion?
None.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries. We're adjourned.